Well, what tells me is the export controls are working because that chip is not nearly as good. It's years behind what we have in the United States. We have the most sophisticated semiconductors in the world. China doesn't. We've out-innovated China.
Well, you mean Taiwan.
The semiconductor wars are intensifying. While the US still views China as lagging in technology, Europe is beginning to recognize the true strength of China's chip-making industry. When it comes to semiconductors, there are generally two types we need to be concerned about. The first is cutting-edge chips, such as NVIDIA's A100 and H100, which are crucial for AI technology and deep learning. The US has banned exports of these chips to China on national security grounds, leaving China to play catch-up in this area. However, China dominates another category: legacy chips. These semiconductors are used in almost every device we know, from airplanes and fighter jets to smartphones. Due to its vast industrial capacity, China leads the world in chip production for the mass market, producing 31% of global legacy chips, which translates to over $200 billion in revenue. One country controlling a third of the world's conventional chip supply underscores the importance of supply chains. China's industrial base has allowed it to conquer this sector. While China hasn't yet reached the level of producing 3 to 5 nanometer chips, it's only a matter of time. Their dominance in legacy chips provides them with significant advantages, including the capacity to scale production once breakthroughs are made. More importantly, this dominance provides China with a substantial revenue source for research and development. Take China's semiconductor exports to Russia, for example. Due to Western decoupling, Beijing now dominates the Russian market. Semiconductor exports to Moscow have surged, with chip-making equipment sales exceeding $200 million, a figure that is expected to grow in the coming years. This revenue will help fund China's R&D efforts. The US technology war is also pulling its allies into the fray. President Biden isn't just restricting US chips from reaching Beijing, he's also pressuring companies in Japan, Taiwan, and Europe to stop selling chips to China. The reason is simple: the US fears China's technological advancement.
Well, we are trying to choke their military capacity, so if they feel that, that means our strategy's working. We are not going to, certainly on my watch, we are not going to sell the most sophisticated American chips to China that they want for their military capacity.
And we're going to prevent any company from doing that?
Said,
you can't do business with the United States in this industry if you want to sell those chips to China, correct? We're going to stick to that?
Absolutely, yes. But I do want to be clear. We will also still continue to sell, billions of dollars of chips a year to China, because the vast majority of chips that are made are not, the leading edge, cutting edge that I'm talking about. And that is hard. That's hard for people to accept. It's a kind of a nuanced, complex message and policy reality, but it is the reality. But we're also going to sell, like I said, billions of dollars of less sophisticated chips, which, by the way, Chuck, is good for America. Creates revenue for American companies, which they can plow back into research and development. Even Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo acknowledges that avoiding the Chinese market is impossible. It's simply too large and lucrative to ignore. To put things into perspective, Western narratives often depict China as both a threat and a nation in decline, which can be confusing. So let's use numbers as a reality check. Despite all the restrictions, China still accounts for $10 billion in revenue for NVIDIA, and that's without even purchasing the most advanced chips. This amount is significant for a single country. This scenario is unfolding in Europe as well. ASML, a Dutch chip maker, complies with US sanctions on China, yet Chinese companies remain its biggest customers. In the first quarter of this year, China accounted for €2 billion in revenue, representing 49% of ASML's total sales. This demonstrates the level of dependency Western chip makers have on China. If this revenue suddenly disappeared, company earnings would collapse, leading to significant job losses. It's common sense to treat your best customer well, especially in Europe, where it's simply good business. However, this isn't happening due to US foreign policy. Washington is pressuring its G7 allies to stop servicing their Chinese customers to hinder Beijing's development of high-tech semiconductors. The US aims to dominate the AI chip market, but has no control over China's legacy chip industry, causing Europe to panic over the situation. Europe is sounding the alarm. China is urging its car manufacturers to buy more chips from local firms, moving away from Western chips and focusing on domestic foundries like SMIC. This poses a significant problem for the West, which still sells a large volume of chips to Beijing. Companies like Infineon in Germany are in a panic mode due to these changes.
China is moving swiftly and doubling down on its chip industry. With an ingenious strategy, they are replacing the semiconductors in their own electric vehicles, EVs. Producing an EV requires around 3,000 chips, especially for the latest models, and these chips alone can cost over $3,000. Today, China is the world's largest EV exporter, having surpassed every other country. China not only manufactures chips but also the products that use these chips. Now, they are making a strategic move to decouple from the West. The Chinese government is encouraging companies like BYD and Geely to abandon foreign semiconductors and go local. This strategy allows Chinese chip makers to grow and innovate more effectively by keeping Chinese money within the domestic economy. Although China's most advanced chips are still 5 to 10 years behind, the need for rapid innovation is pressing, and this requires substantial funding. While China provides significant subsidies to its companies, it's counterproductive if EV brands continue buying chips from the US and Europe. Modern cars are increasingly reliant on electronic parts. By 2030, 45% of a car's production cost is expected to come from electronics, with semiconductors accounting for a significant portion of that. As China continues to roll out more cars worldwide, especially across Asia, it will earn substantial revenue. If all the chips in these EVs are China-made, it will bolster their semiconductor industry, providing more funds for research and development. Philip Wang, the chief scientist at TSMC, emphasizes that the Chinese industry should not be underestimated.
What about China?
China is, I don't think we could ignore their capability. The only thing that I see that the US is still a little bit ahead is in coming up with the new ideas. What the Chinese always say, going from 0 to 1. Namely, starting from nowhere, nothing, and come up with this really new idea. And if I look at what I would call new idea that is not been discussed before, the US still, if you read the research papers, the US still is the principal place where these new ideas come from. But once these new ideas become known, then
you see mushrooming of this new ideas in other places.
Exactly. And I feel it in my everyday research with my students.
Oh my gosh.
Any new ideas that we come up with, once they become known, this is a good idea.
The next week it will show up in China.
It will actually show up in China. Not only that, they do it better than you.
Yeah.
I cannot compete anymore. They have better resources. They have more students. They have more funding from the government. I cannot compete anymore. I have to get out of that field.
China's strategy lies in its dominance in the electric vehicle EV market. As the largest EV exporter globally, China exported over 130,000 EVs in October last year alone. These exports include not only Chinese cars but also global brands like Tesla. With Beijing controlling the entire supply chain, the shift towards Chinese semiconductors could be profound. The majority of EVs made in China could eventually be equipped with Chinese-made chips. This transition will start slowly but will accelerate rapidly, creating significant concerns in Europe. Europe's main advantage has been its head start in manufacturing, but high production costs, especially in Germany, make it difficult to compete. In contrast, China's President Xi Jinping has made innovation a national priority, and Chinese companies are responding by building numerous semiconductor plants. Over the next few years, approximately 100 new plants will be built globally, with 40% of them in China. Chinese companies are constructing 41 new plants, more than twice the number being built in Taiwan, Europe, or the US. China's ability to produce semiconductors at scale means it can flood the market with affordable chips, starting with its domestic EV market. This will generate significant revenue for local chip makers, providing funds to develop cutting-edge chips to compete with the US. China's capital expenditure to sales ratio for global chip makers is exceptionally high, with companies like SMIC investing heavily to expand production capacity. Chinese foundries are investing nearly all of their earnings into growth, with a capex ratio exceeding 90%. This level of investment is double that of Taiwan and almost 3 times that of the US, highlighting China's commitment to winning the semiconductor war. Replacing Western chips in their cars will accelerate this process. The equation is simple: more revenue earned means more money to invest in developing better chips. China's epic game of catch-up in the semiconductor industry is evident, and their seriousness is reflected in their investment strategies. This is China's playbook for industrial domination. Chinese companies are willing to endure lower profits for a long time, focusing on the long game. In the meantime, the biggest loser in this scenario will likely be Europe, which faces a stacked deck and limited options. Many German automakers, like Volkswagen and Mercedes, build their cars in China, where they have large production plants. If Chinese chips cost less, these companies may be compelled to switch to remain competitive. Beijing is urging car manufacturers to increase their use of local chips, aiming for up to 25% of their total sourcing. Currently, this figure is around 10%, but it could easily double or even triple by next year. Given the ongoing EU trade war, it's clear that China won't hesitate to push its agenda. The EV war we see today is just the beginning. The next battleground will be semiconductors, a much larger and more critical arena. While the West holds the advantage today, in 5 to 10 years, China may dominate in both quantity and quality. What do you think? Will China's plan succeed? And does the EU have any viable response to this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay safe, and don't forget to like and subscribe as we navigate these turbulent times. Thank you for watching.